Hello beautiful friends and fellow word lovers. Welcome back to Pocket of Poetry. Today's video is going to be my June wrap up and I'm going to be telling you guys about all the books I read in June as per usual. So let's get right into it. So this month I read a grand whopping total of 4 books. Yeah, I had high hopes at the beginning of this month, but those hopes did not pan out the way that I thought they would, and I ended up reading 4. I DNF'd 1 and I read 4 to completion. Overall though, it was a good reading month. I had 2 5 stars in there. So anyways, I'll get started. So the first book I read was, as you guys probably already know if you've watched any of my other videos from this month, The House by the Cerulean Sea by T.J. Klune. This book I gave a rating of 4 stars. I quite liked it. I thought it was very cute, very sweet, and sort of had that childlike simplicity to it that made me like picture myself reading it to my kids one day, because I mean there definitely were like things for adults in there, but I found it to be like a really sweet, like, oh, I would read this to my kids. Like I could totally see a kid like loving the story and their imagination, just loving it. And it was very simplistic in its themes and its messages, but like in a good way, you know, like it was simplistic in the way that like, yeah, love people, don't hate people, like have tolerance and love for everybody regardless of their differences. That was basically the message of the book, and I thought that it was illustrated in a very lovely and cute way. So yeah, and I mean obviously it wasn't like the most deep literary achievement ever, but it was really sweet and good. So 4 stars it is. Next up, the next book that I read, and what a roller coaster it was The Goldfinch by Donna Tartt. If you guys watched my reading blog, you've already heard me rant about this book, but it was so good, and I don't even know how to explain Donna Tartt's writing. Like, she's just, nothing else in the world makes me feel like her books make me feel, which is kind of sad, but also beautiful and amazing at the same time. Like, she just has this incredible, captivating way of writing. The details are so clear and vivid. Like, I've never been more immersed in a story, I don't think, in my life than I was in this book. Like, it just is like the most immersive reading experience, because the level of detail that she puts into her writing makes you feel like you're actually experiencing the story. And she writes her, like, well, I've only read 2 of her books. I read The Secret History and The Goldfinch, both of which are told from first-person narratives, and both of them are told from first-person narratives of rather morally questionable characters. And she's really good at the unreliable narrator. She's really good at writing characters that have their own very strong personal bias, which makes it that much more fascinating to read, because she writes as if it's like a memoir that this person is writing about their own life and their own experience. And so it's just so fascinating and so good, and the story itself is incredible. Like, just everything that happens and the themes that are dealt with, like, basically what you have to know is this book deals with art theft and lots of other crazy wild things. Basically a young boy inadvertently steals a very famous painting when he's 13 years old, and he's in a museum bombing, and from that point forward his life is changed, and it basically shows him as a young boy and how it affects his life then, and then how it affects his life when he's an adult later on. Anyways, this book was a solid 5 stars for me. I just adore Donna Tartt so much. Like, she's the kind of writer that puts me in complete awe of the fact that a human being is capable of such literary heights. So that was my second book, and it was a very big mistake to read this book early on in the month, because it put me into a straight reading slump. Because after that, everything, like after reading The Goldfinch, everything just kind of lacked the shine and the luster that The Goldfinch had, and it just made everything else fall so flat. So I just got really unmotivated with my reading, and I didn't really feel like reading any of my other books. But then I got the idea, I just randomly had the thought that I wanted to read one of my nostalgic high school books, and that book is The Orchard by Crystal and Jensen. I made an entire video reviewing this book and talking about this book, and I uploaded that, so I'll link it up there. If you guys want to check it out, I thought it would be fun to like go back and revisit my high school book that I loved so much. It was like my favorite romance growing up, and I just thought it would be fun to like revisit it and see what I thought of it now. So that's what I did. And so if you're interested to hear my thoughts on this one, you can watch that video. But overall, I gave this book 3 stars. Like, rating it from an objective standpoint, it's a solid 3-star. I really enjoy this book because of how nostalgic it is for me, but if it weren't for the nostalgia, I probably would have just been super bored, because I no longer enjoy these kinds of books the way I once did. But because of the nostalgia, I just love it. So I gave it 3 stars though, just because literarily, from a literary standpoint, this book is pretty meh. But it's just cute. It's just cute and it's fun. It's fluffy and it's fun. So yeah. Then the next book that I attempted to read was These Violent Delights by Chloe Gong. I was excited for this book. I thought it was going to be so good. I had such high expectations, and then I just did not like it. I actually DNF'd this. Let's see, I still have my bookmark. That's how far I got. So almost halfway. And I don't know. I was sitting in the airport because I went to Cape Cod this month. And on the flight home, or waiting for my flight home, I was sitting in the airport trying to read this for the like 5th, 6th time. And I realized, who am I? This isn't what Olivia does. She doesn't sit around reading books that bore her to death and make her feel like stabbing her eyes out. So I just stopped reading it. I feel like that's kind of an unfair thing to say because, I mean, I can see why people enjoy this book. Like, I can see why people like it, but for me personally, it just was not my thing. The writing style just drove me insane. I did not like it at all. It was confusing. It was a lot of things were kind of weirdly worded, and then the characters were just so, oh my gosh, boring. Like, I am such a character-driven reader and such a writing style-driven reader, and both of those things were so lacking for me. The characters, I just did not connect them. I just didn't see them in any sort of depth. Like the main character, Juliet, really the only personality trait that she had was that she was like ruthless and merciless, and that was like her only personality trait, and I really did not connect with her. Like, just, I don't know, she was really bratty, and like she wasn't like your typical tough, like strong heroine. She was just super bratty and like annoying. And then her love interest, don't even get me started on him. He was like so bland. Like, I don't think he had a single interesting thing that I could name about him or anything that I even remember about him. Like, he was just so boring, and every chapter that was like his POV, I was like falling asleep. That's how bored I was. So I guess like the story, like the concept was really cool. Oh, and then I didn't realize that it was a fantasy. From the description, it makes it sound like it's kind of just like a contemporary book, which honestly I would have preferred. But there's like this weird element of like magic and like supernatural to it, because there's like this monster and there's like this disease that's infecting people, and it's like the whole plot point of the book. And I really did not like expect that to be the main plot point. I thought it was going to be like more about the gangs themselves and more about, and like I understand they had to have like a common enemy to fight in order to like bring the two lovers together again. But I just didn't like the main central conflict. I just was super bored by it. So yeah, sorry if you love this book. I did DNF'd it, so I can't give it an actual rating, but I just wasn't my cup of tea. And then the final book that I read in June, which is weird to say because I finished it, well, I guess I finished it like last week, was The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern. I read most of this book while I was on vacation, and you guys, I loved it. This book was an easy 5-star for me. It lived up to the hype, like 100% for me. Like when I first started reading it, I will say that it took me a little bit to get into it because the beginning, again, I had come off of reading the Goldfinch, and so I was kind of like, ooh, like the writing style is a lot more simplistic, and so it took me a second to like adjust to the rhythm of the writing. But when I got to the scene, the part that I got really hooked was the scene where they're describing, if you've read the book, you'll know, they're describing the midnight dinners with this guy, the guy who ends up developing the idea of the circus. He has these midnight dinners at his house, and it's described in this one scene, and I fell in love with the book from that point forward. Just the descriptions, the way it was described, the way it was talked about, I just loved it. I just loved it so much. I wanted to eat it. And from that point forward, it just got super, super interesting, because that was when the circus started, and all the descriptions of the circus were so lovely and magical, and just, it was like the perfect fantasy escape that you want to escape into. And like the characters, I actually loved the characters. And like the main like criticism of this book that I've heard is that there's like no plot or whatever, and it's all just description. And I disagree with that. I think it definitely has a plot. It's not a super fast-paced, thrilling plot. It's definitely more slow-moving, but it has a plot, and I loved the plot. I thought the storyline was really clever and lovely, but yes, it was very atmospheric, very elemental. It had a lot of a lot of indulgent passages of description, and I adored every second of it. So overall, this book was just really sweet. I loved it. I loved the whole concept. So basically, the storyline of this book, you have two rival magicians, Celia and Marco, who are trained from the time they're children to compete against each other in this magical competition, to kind of like see who has better skills. And so the Night Circus is actually the venue for their competition, even though of course nobody else knows that. The two of them are creating like new attractions and tents and things for the circus, as part of this competition. Those books that you just escape into to just feel good and feel happy. And it was honestly the perfect balance for the other books that I read this month. Like, well, I guess most of the books that I read were kind of like feel good books, minus the Goldfinch. The Goldfinch is not a feel good book. The Goldfinch is a cry your eyes out, really depressing but very thought-provoking kind of book. So it was a good balance. And yes, this is my other 5-star read for June. So that, my friends, is it for the wrap up. Thank you so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a like and consider subscribing if you feel like it. And I will see you all in the next video.